All right, for this final video of today, we're going to be opening up the special modes and the experimental section. This is the Wild West of Cura. It is where all the developers on Cura's side, they will invent some random fun thing to do with 3D printing and post it into this section. In the experimental area, it is kind of temporary. As soon as they release new versions, if they find that a lot of people are actually printing with it and they actually like it, fantastic. Then it'll go into the rest of the real features. And everything in the experimental is purely experimental. It is potentially really, really cool or potentially not that exciting. But the ones that we'll go over today are really, really cool applications that you can put into your 3D printed parts. The first one we'll touch on in special modes is something called Spiralize Outer Contour. It's most commonly known as vase mode in other 3D printing slicer softwares. And it basically just means if you want to print something like a vase, where it doesn't need to be tremendously strong, it only really needs to have one layer all the way around it, and you want it to print really, really quickly, well then you can enable this feature. So this is a part called a low poly spiralized vase. We printed it in silk red. Silk just means shiny when you're looking at filament, so it reflects the light really well. I can open up that file by going Control O, and then picking low poly vase, and prepare, there we go. And right now it is a completely solid object. So if you wanted to take this and still print it, but say, hey, give it 6 layers all the way around, then it would make it a really, really strong part. You would then have to say, hey, give it 0 top layers, 6 bottom layers, and a 0% infill, and then it gives you an empty vase you can fill with flowers or water, whatever you'd like. But for us, we're going to say Spiralize Outer Contour. And this is a really, really funky feature where it'll actually say, when we give it a preview, it'll actually make it exactly 1 layer thick. And instead of making distinct layers, where it will move around, move up, do a print, move up a little bit, and it makes that Z seam, this will make a continuous spiral all the way around. So something like a vase where it doesn't really have a top, just has a base and some walls, that prints really, really well. And because it's printing so quick, or so few walls, and it's not really needing to stop for any reason, it prints incredibly quickly. If you ever go to any 3D printing events where lots of different companies will try and show off their best new printer, they will very often be printing in vase mode because it shows how large you can 3D print and how quick you can do it. So it's a really, really good feature to get on hand. I printed lots of stuff with Spiralize, and it is just a very, very cool object. But it's not something I use every day, but it is a special thing. Wanting to get rid of that, we'll bring back in our 3D Benchy. And then we can go into some of the other features that you'll find in experimental. So in experimental, we're just going to be talking about 3 of the things in here. Remember, if you want to check out the full list, you can go into any tab and click on this little slider icon, and this will show you every single little feature on there. We're just going to be talking about 3 of them today. So the first one is a draft shield. So what draft shield does is it makes up a little 1-layer border all the way around your print. So if you're in a room that has a fan going on, or if you're printing near, I don't know, an open door, and that wind will come and it will actually cool your part in ways you don't want it to, then this will kind of stop that. So as it's printing up its layers, it's printing this little border all the way around it as well. And it will hide from the wind coming in pretty well. I found that I don't really need to use that because I'm always printing inside an office where I've got all of my printers, they're usually closed off, and I don't have any external fans or external windows kind of letting in any wind or any air to it. So this isn't super necessary for me, but it may be a little bit more necessary to you. Moving onwards, we can put on something called fuzzy skin, which is a very strange part of 3D printing, where if you need to give a texture to something, if you want something to have a grip, a grippy kind of knurled surface to it, then you can apply fuzzy skin. Fuzzy skin basically makes the very outer layer of your 3D printed object, instead of nice and smooth, kind of chaotic and almost vibrating. So if we check out the preview, you will see it is very busy. It is very, very strange. And if you're making something like a handle for a project you're making on, then this outer surface will almost have a grippable texture, almost like sandpaper almost. And you can see as we go through the layers, the inside is still perfectly normal, you know, so we have still a good strength associated with it, but this outer structure is shaking just a little bit. And we can set this fuzzy skin thickness, just how chaotic is it going, but you can make parts that look very, very, very strange. I haven't seen too many applications outside of grip for a handle, or if you need to make a part grip something else in real life, this is a pretty good way to go around it. But for most 3D printed parts, isn't too necessary, but it's a cool thing to have on hand. And then finally, we have a thing called wire printing. Now, annoyingly, wire printing isn't something that I'm able to preview on Cura. It'll just kind of show a bunch of these little red lines on the bottom. But what wire printing does is it'll allow us to, if we want to make a full-size model, instead of printing layers, sedimentary layers that it builds up, it'll actually move in really strange zigzag, almost sawtooth patterns as it builds it up. So it prints an object that is very large, very, very quickly, but very sparse. It makes one layer all the way around, and it basically makes super, super light object. I haven't really noticed any very important applications, any uses for it, outside of just being a really strange, random bit of 3D printing that you can use. And if you try and print something very small, it's kind of hard to see what it is. So if you're going to use this as just kind of something interesting to do, print something really cool and post it, and make sure you hashtag Sliceform. All right, guys, have fun. Make sure you play around with your slicer, and we'll see you next time.